By the way, the thing I put at the end of the run sheet, Mike, did that make sense? The segment stuff, did you understand? Sure, for a three-game slate. What's happening, everybody, and welcome to the Stokastic NFL Deeper Dive, and a little bit of a different mix-up. Typically on Saturdays, Neil Orfield and I, Neil, who's one of Millie Maker, he's one of the good guys that I like to have to talk about large field football tournaments with me. We typically are breaking down the main slate on Saturdays for Sunday, but because today we've got a three-game Saturday slate, we've got the main Sunday slate for today. The next hour, Neil and I are going to go through all the games game by game, and there's going to be a live before lock right after this with Eric Lindquist and Matt Savoca. But right now, Neil and I are going to be going game by game, talking about the Colts and the Vikings, the Ravens and the Browns, and then the Dolphins and the Bills. As you guys come in, do us a favor, like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel. Neil, what is happening?
Yeah, it's exciting. I love a three-game NFL slate. You get really different with a three-gamer versus a full slate. Just having football on Saturday, very exciting. My Vikings playing the first game of the day. That's exciting. It's going to be a fun day.
So I have to ask you, I saw a question about it immediately in the YouTube comments. It's been something I've been thinking about as well, but we've got Mike, who's producing the show. He's typically up in Buffalo, and bad weather conditions there. Apparently really poor, according to some of the weather reports. It's only a three-game slate, but I do want to know, how are you approaching the late game today, where, you know, as of right now, it's a little uncertain. I've seen different weather reports in terms of some people are saying it's going to be, you know, blizzard conditions. Some other weather reports now saying that it might not be really terrible during the game. A lot of the snow is going to be coming before the game. How much is this going to impact the way you approach your lineup builds?
I mean, it definitely impacts the way I approach my lineup builds. But I got to say this, our tools are factoring this in already. So the Vegas total is pretty clearly factoring in the weather, right? Like, this game is showing a much lower total than you would expect for a Buffalo-Miami game. We have the total at 43 right now, at least last I checked. That's a really low total for the Dolphins and Bills playing. These are two great offenses, and we've got a relatively low total. So the total is factoring in this weather uncertainty. And as a result, so are our projections, so are the boom bust tool, et cetera. So, you can still lean on the tools despite the weather, but on top of, leaning on the tools. So as I say, I mean, just looking at the top stack, so we have Josh Allen projected for 26% ownership, 32% chance of Buffalo being the top stack. We have Miami. We have Tua projected for 6.5% ownership, 12% chance of being the top stack. So you can certainly still play these lineups, but I will say, I do prefer, if I'm hand building, which I'm probably not doing today, I will, in some lineups factor it in and other lineups not factored in, kind of. So, like, when in the lineups where I am factored in, maybe I'll be more likely to play Devin Singletary, since Miami doesn't have a great defense. Maybe the Bills are running the ball more and Devin Singletary benefits from that. And in lineups where I don't factor in as much, obviously I'm going to be playing the stacks instead. So a lot of different ways. It's an interesting situation when you get a three-game slate to begin with, and then weather uncertainty in two of the games on top of that. The other one being the Cleveland game is also, there's I think some wins there. So, if you want to factor it in there, I'm not factoring in that one much at all, but yeah, it's pretty fun to have this weather on a three-game slate.
Yeah, and I think you hit on the key thing here that is a really key talking point if you're looking at some of the data and the tools we have on the site, or just any projection source you're using, is that there is an element of the Vegas line, the sports betting lines, that get factored into what the game, how it should project in the players. The total's 43.5. If the Bills and the Dolphins were playing in good weather conditions, the total for this game would be like 53.5. So not only is it baked into the total, it's baked in a very significant way. Hence, it ends up being factored into the projections as well. So if you're looking at the projections, don't say, oh, okay, well, Josh Allen's projected for, whatever the most recent number is, a 28% chance to be the top stack on FanDuel, or on DraftKings, he's projected with a 32% chance. That doesn't change. That's already factored in. You shouldn't be looking at it and say, like, oh, well, I think it's 28% now, or 25%, and you're just going to downgrade it. It's already factored in. So I think that is information you guys should know. It's included in the projections already. And by the way, if you guys have not signed up for our projections yet, we have our 3-day free trial. And this is really one of the best opportunities to take advantage of it, because we have the Saturday NFL slate. We have the Sunday NFL slate and then Monday Night Football as well. So if you guys want to get 3 days free access, you're going to get 3 different NFL slates that you could take advantage of with this promo. So when you sign up, just click on the link below in the description box. Also, it's going to be thrown into the YouTube chat in a second that Mike will throw it in. So if you guys want to get access to our tools for free, 3 days if you guys haven't signed up before, and now is probably the time you're going to be getting the best value possible out of those 3 days.
Yes,
and we
is.
do. Yeah. So
I mean, it was either Thursday, so you could take advantage of Thursday Night Football, Saturday and Sunday, or today. Now you missed a chance on Thursday. Now you get Saturday, Sunday, and Monday. Absolutely, time to take advantage.
Plus, there's the NBA slate today, MMA slate, final MMA slate of the year. So lots of stuff going on. But we've got a super chat here from Fresca. Wants to know, is Josh Allen plus Bills D a good stack with the weather? So I don't really think there's a ton of correlation between Josh Allen and the Bills defense. Like, I wouldn't consider it really a traditional stack in any way. I will say that I am not getting very much exposure to the Bills defense on FanDuel. I am on DraftKings. So it depends which site you're talking about, because on FanDuel, I've got lineups built out for both sites. The Bills defense is $4,800, by far the most expensive on the slate, and I find them very difficult to get to. On DraftKings, however, and this is what happens, the difference between sites and the pricing, the Bills are the defense I get to the most because they are very cheap, because it kind of looks like FanDuel pricing was incorporating some of the weather into it. The DraftKings pricing, at least as far as DFS goes, was not. So with that in mind, depending what site you're talking about, I like the Bills defense a lot more on DraftKings than I do on FanDuel. And then one other thing, and a little more liberties we could play with before going game by game, because there's only 3 games to hit on. From just a lineup construction standpoint, Neil, how differently will some of your rules look that you set in Fantasy Cruncher for a 3-game slate as opposed to a 10 or 11 main game football slate?
First of all, let me respond to Freshka, because I've been talking with Freshka on Twitter and in DMs. I know that he is inclined to play the Bills stack today because he needs them in best ball. And I've been trying to convince him that this is a perfect hedging opportunity. You need the Bills in best ball. So in DFS, just X the Bills out, but he's reluctant to do so. So yeah, I would say as far as stacking goes, I was talking about how, maybe some lineups I'm factoring in the weather, other lineups I'm not. Yeah, I don't think that there's really strong correlation. I guess Josh Allen is such a rushing quarterback that maybe he rushes more in bad weather. So I think that, this stack with Josh Allen and the Bills D is fine, but it's not, I think it's fine. I guess I agree with you. I think it's fine. It's not something that I really see extra positive correlation with the Bills and Josh Allen. As far as 3-game slate versus 10-game slate, yeah, it's a massive difference. I mean, you and I were talking before the show. You were setting your lineups and saying that you were running into couldn't create enough lineups because of your restriction. And I said jokingly, well, the trick on a 3-game slate is just to set no restrictions, which I was joking, but I was kind of half joking because my restrictions are much less on a 3-game slate. So like on a main slate, I'm more inclined to double stack with a bring back, right? On a 3-game slate, I'm not forcing a bring back at all. I am still stacking with my quarterbacks. I'm not going to have any lineups that are unstacked. And I still probably do prefer the double stack if you're playing like Matt Ryan, Kirk Cousins, the guys who don't run as much. But I don't force it in as much with the stacks, and I don't force in a run back at all. I also allow offensive players versus my defense. I think I'm going to set mine to 3 just because otherwise I'm not going to get any double stacks against the opposing defense. So I think I'm going to set 3 being, and that is a high number. So I don't know that's necessarily the way to play it. Maybe you really don't want your defense against your quarterback, but I'm still trying to get a little bit different. Like I'm more concerned on this slate being a 3-gamer than I would be on a 10-gamer with actually running into duplicated lineups, which you really don't want. So, I'm trying to get a little bit different. And one easy way to get different is offensive players versus defense. So those are a couple of the ways. I'm trying to think if there are any other. I'm not like setting a max salary like I do on Showdown. I don't think you have to go to that extent to get different. But I thought it was interesting. So I listened to Alex and Lofty yesterday, and Alex was saying that on this kind of slate, one way he likes to get different is to do like full-on onslaughts, like one team, have several players with no run back, which I thought was interesting. Not something that I usually try to force in, but it is something that normally I wouldn't allow it, right? So normally I would say I set a max of 4 players per team. Like on a main slate, I think I set my max players from a team to be 4. On this slate, I'll probably just leave it at 6. Maybe I'll change it to 5, but I'll allow more players from one team. So a lot of ways to get a little bit a lot of ways that I approach it a little bit differently, where I'm just really not as restrictive on a 3-game slate.
Yeah, and it's the same for me in terms of like 12-game NFL slate, 10-game NFL slate. I'm never playing players versus their defense. There's not a need to on a slate of this size. If I don't do it when I'm making lineups in fantasy manager, it won't make enough lineups for me on a slate of this size. So I'd originally set it to 1 player versus defense, and then I had to change it to 2 just so that my lineups wouldn't be so restrictive that I was able to make enough lineups. Because I guess that really would make sense, because probably some of the stack rules that I've set as well, it was trying to make lineups and just not allowing as many defensive players versus the opponent. It was just conflicting with some of my stack rules. So yeah, it's definitely something that's going to play a little bit of a factor. Now, I also want to pull up, Mike, I'm about to send you a screenshot here for the weather for this game, because somebody in chat was saying they don't see any weather in the forecast for the Bills game. Maybe he's trolling. I don't know. But I took a screen cap here of the weather at a kickoff for the Bills game. And Mike, if you could just share this on screen so we could see what it is that we're looking at here in terms of the weather for Buffalo. Snow, a little bit of wind, and yeah, it looks like it's supposed to snow a good amount tonight in Buffalo. That's why the total is like 10 points lower than it otherwise normally would be. So cold, snowy, a little bit of wind. It's not necessarily ideal for high scoring football game. Now, does that mean that it can't be high scoring? No, but on average, it's going to be lower scoring than we would normally expect. Let's jump into the first game on the slate. Unless, Neil, do you have any overarching strategy questions that you want to bring up before we start to get into the games?
One thing I was just thinking about, and it's not really a great strategy question, but do you think ownership gets more steam than it normally would on that Miami Buffalo game because it's the final game of the night? I feel like there's like people who are hand building psychologically, you want to have at least 1 player from the final game of the night on a 3-year, because it's chronological. People like to have something to cheer for at the end. I kind of think that is something that, you can't really factor it in, but I think it's I do think that that's probably something that a lot of people will do, is maybe include more players from that game than they otherwise would. Like people who might be scared off because of the weather might actually change their mind and say, but it is the last game and I want to have, I don't know. So no, I guess the answer is no. I don't have any great strategy questions that I want to talk about before. We'll get into it throughout the show.
All right, so let's start by talking about the individual games. By the way, here is that weather report that I'd sent over. So as you can see, it's snowing, by the way, fairly hard right now in Buffalo. Supposed to start to die down a little bit in the afternoon and pick back up. So if you're looking at the weather report, I'm like one of those guys with a teleprompter in front of him pointing to different stuff. But so kickoff tonight is 8:15 p.m. Eastern time. So you can see right there, that is the 8 p.m. time, 72% chance of snow. And then it looks like more likely than not, it's going to be snowing until well past midnight tonight in Buffalo. So at least that is what the weather forecast is right now. I'm not a meteorologist, but I do have Google. Let's start talking about the Indianapolis Colts against the Minnesota Vikings. And because of the conditions in the Buffalo-Miami game, this is the game with the highest total on the slate, 47.5 points between Minnesota and Indianapolis. Now, starting with the Colts side of the game, let's start with Matt Ryan and the quarterback situation, where it's a good matchup for him against the Vikings. The game is supposed to be fairly high scoring. The spread isn't that one-sided either. So the Colts are a team that are expected to put some points up on the board. How does it make you view Matt Ryan as a quarterback option and a potential guy to build stacks around today?
Yeah, I mean, so Matt Ryan, not the best quarterback at this stage of his career. He's not particularly great, but against this Vikings defense, I do have some interest. Just looking at the top stack tool, 17% projected ownership, 10% chance to be in the top stack, so negative leverage there, but then 19% chance to be in the top value stack. That looks pretty good. The Vikings defense is just one of those defenses that you want to play as a quarterback. They're 27th in terms of pass DVOA. So one of the best matchups that Matt Ryan can possibly have. I'm interested in Matt Ryan. I think that if he's going to be going, under owned because people don't want to play Matt Ryan, maybe that's a spot where I'm going to take advantage of the matchup. And 17% ownership. I guess it's not unowned. He is getting some ownership. There are lower owned quarterbacks on the slate. He's kind of middling, but hard for me not to have some interest against this Vikings defense that is just not great. You can obviously pair him with Michael Pittman. You can play Paris Campbell. You can throw Alec Pierce in there, and then whichever tight end you want to play. There are some viable stacking options there. So I do have some interest in Matt Ryan.
As far as cheap stacks go, if I had to pick out a cheap one across DraftKings and FanDuel, it would be the Colts that I would lean towards. just in terms of look at the really, really cheap options today, starting with DraftKings, there's really three of them. You've got the Browns, you've got the Ravens, you've got the Colts. Of those three teams, we have the best value score on the Colts. We've got the best top stack odds on them. And then over on FanDuel, kind of the same thing where we've got four or three real cheaper situations, and it's the same ones where we've got the Browns, the Colts, the Ravens. If I'm picking out one of them, it's going to be the Colts. My preference is overall for the slate, if you guys are only hand building a few lineups, to go to Josh Allen and the Bills or to go to Kirk Cousins and the Vikings on the other side. But if I'm going with one of the less popular quarterbacks, actually I'm going to lean towards Matt Ryan. And the Vikings a little bit fraudulent this year, at least in terms of the record goes. I'm sorry to break it to you, Neil, but despite their record, they're not one of the best teams in the NFL. They have a basically neutral point differential. They're certainly the best team in their division, which also doesn't say much. But I do think this is a pretty easy matchup for Matt Ryan. The Vikings defense hasn't been great this year, and he is cheap, which presents some opportunities there. But now the running back spot, there are not very many running backs that I think we could feel really good about the workload about. But one of them we can feel good about today is Jonathan Taylor. But is he somebody you're going to want to pay up for much today?
First of all, let me just correct the record and say the Vikings defense is fraudulent. The Vikings offense is elite. I love the Vikings offense. Yeah, Jonathan Taylor. I mean, yes, he's pretty clearly the best running back on the slate, both in terms of opportunity and matchup. We have him optimal 55% of the time. He is facing, yes, a bad Vikings defense. It's a great spot for Jonathan Taylor. With that said, we have him coming in at 70% ownership right now. That is ridiculous. I am not going to be playing 70% Jonathan Taylor. That's pretty clearly. I mean, you can just look in the boom bust tool and it'll tell you 70% ownership versus 55% chance of being optimal. Yeah, seems about right. Despite the matchup, I mean, Jonathan Taylor hasn't had that many great games this year. Obviously, if he's going to have one, he's more likely to have it against this Vikings defense. They're 14th in terms of rush DVS, so a little bit of a pass funnel. I don't really think that affects Jonathan Taylor all that much. He can obviously run on anybody, but the Colts only have a 22 implied team total, and he's getting 70% ownership. So I'm not going to say like I'm fading Jonathan Taylor because I might be playing 50% of Jonathan Taylor or something like that. But he's certainly a negative leverage play, and there are a number of interesting running back options on this slate. Like they all kind of have warts, but there are a lot of running backs on the slate that I actually have some interest in.
Yeah, Minnesota, by the way, just an overall snapshot. The defense 22nd in defensive defense DVOA, 27th against the pass, 14th against the run. So the spot on paper for Jonathan Taylor, I would necessarily say that it's like the best matchup possible for running back, but just considering the pace of play relative to the other running backs on the slate. And then also just the fact that I don't really know what to make of the workload of a lot of the running backs we have today. Like I feel good about Jonathan Taylor's workload, Dalvin Cook's workload, but then we've got the iffy weather in the Buffalo Miami game. I don't really know who's going. Like, is James Cook going to be getting most of the snaps of running back for Buffalo? Is it going to be Devin Singletary? It's kind of hard to say. So Jonathan Taylor, I do think he's somebody who brings a lot of security to the running back position, whereas it's kind of hard to find that elsewhere. But as far as any other running backs on the Colts, like I do think we should talk about some of the backups since it's only a 3-game slate. Would you be looking to roster any other running back on the Colts in a large field tournament?
On the Colts, I don't know.
No is an acceptable answer, by the way. You don't have to say somebody. I'm just making sure that we cover all our bases.
Yeah, I don't think so. I think that on a full 3-game slate, I mean, you're kind of relying on an injury here with we've got Deion Jackson and Zach Moss, the only two other running backs that you really have to consider. Deion Jackson played 8 snaps in the most recent game. Zach Moss played 5. I don't think they're getting in there unless there is an injury. In a milli maker, I mean, you could consider it. I've done crazier things, but there are other spots that I like better. So I think my answer is no.
So let's talk about the pass catchers then. And which pass catchers, if any, from the Colts are you going to be prioritizing today?
I'm Michael Pittman, a pretty big priority for me. He's pretty clearly the wide receiver 1 for the Colts. We've got him projected for 39% ownership with a 46% chance of being optimal. He's only 5,800. I get it. Like the Colts have just been such a bad offense all year that, Michael Pittman hasn't really had the season that people were hoping for coming in, but he's 5,800 in one of the best matchups you can get as a wide receiver. So I like Michael Pittman quite a bit today. After Pittman, it's a little bit more muddled. I have some interest in Paris Campbell. He's just been out there running routes. In the most recent game, Paris Campbell played 78% of snaps, and that is his lowest since week 4. And I don't think that's a trend. I think that's just what happened in the last game. I think that he's going to be out there for almost every snap. He's probably the wide receiver 2 on the Colts. But Alec Pierce certainly making a case that he might be the wide receiver 2 at this point. He's had 8 targets in 2 of the past 3 games, has been just very involved in the passing game. What do we have? We have Alec Pierce's ownership at 16% ownership. That's lower than I would kind of guess. It wouldn't surprise me to see that number come up a little bit against this Vikings defense from 16%. But if it is 16%, I would actually love Alec Pierce here. It's 3,900. 23.4% chance of being optimal. I think that he's a great, if the ownership stays at around 16%, I think that he is a phenomenal play. And even if it comes up a little bit, if it comes up to 25%, he's still a good play. It's a neutral play at 25%. So definitely going to have some interest in Alec Pierce as well. Outside of those 3, let me think if there's anybody else among the wide receivers. I mean, Ashton Doolin, again, like that's a showdown play for me. I loved him on the last showdown slate the Colts were on a full 3-game slate. Because like on a 3-game slate, 1 touchdown from a guy who is in the $3,000 to $4,000 range where he gets 9-10 points might be enough, but it also isn't going to hurt you to not have that player. So I don't think that I need to go to Ashton Doolin. Again, in a milli maker, I think you consider playing some Ashton Doolin, but not my favorite play.
Yeah, so for me, actually, when we talk about the other side of the game with the Vikings, I'm getting a lot of exposure to this game. I'm overweight to most of the pass catchers on both sides. That goes for on both FanDuel and DraftKings. Overweight to Paris Campbell, Alec Pierce, Michael Pittman, and then run backs on the other side. I'm overweight to Justin Jefferson and Adam Thielen. This goes for both FanDuel and DraftKings. So I'm going to be pretty high on the passing game in this spot because I do think that it's the one that just by far on paper sets up the best for just being a shootout, and the players project the best relative to salaries in this game. As far as the tight ends go for the Colts, Jelani Woods, Kylan Granson, I got a couple lineups of each of them on FanDuel and DraftKings, but it's nothing really significant. The tight end situation here, a little bit of a crapshoot. I much prefer the wideouts.
Yeah, I do too. I mean, it is definitely not the best situation for these. It's a three tight end, splitting snaps. Kylan Granson in the most recent game ran routes on 50% of snaps. He ran 20 routes. So I guess he'd probably be my preference. But then Jelani Woods, I kind of thought that he maybe would have a bigger role after he did so well against Pittsburgh with when Kylan Granson was out. Jelani Woods just tore up Pittsburgh and looked great. And I thought, okay, they found their tight end 1. Now they're going to roll with him. And then, of course, following that up, he just ran 11 routes in the most recent game. So it's a little bit of a crapshoot. Maybe they, go back to him in this game. But with Kylan Granson active, I think most likely Kylan Granson is the tight end 1 here, the guy that I'd have the most interest in. But, we're only talking about him because of the 3-game slate, right? Like on a full slate, I wouldn't play him, but on a 3-game slate, I think, all of these guys are playable in a milli maker setting. None of these guys are making like a cash game lineup or a small field GPP. Throw in Mo Ellie Cox in that trio as well. But yeah, my preference, if you're going to play one, would be Kylan Granson, followed by Jelani Woods, followed by Mo Ellie Cox. But honestly, they are kind of milli maker only plays.
Got a super chat here from Thomas Renberger. He says, Dobbins' birthday today, big game coming. First of all, I would say in general, running backs getting older. This is a negative, not a positive. Running back birthdays, I know people love their narratives, but I'm concerned about the health of J.K. Dobbins. I know that he had a bigger game last week, but he didn't really look right all the time when he was running the football. In terms of my exposures right now, running backs, I am not really getting to a whole bunch of J.K. Dobbins. I know I'm getting ahead of ourselves a little bit, but I'm not going to be really all that high on Dobbins today. Are you going to be high on J.K. Dobbins relative to his ownership?
I mean, kind of. Like I'm not going to like jam in J.K. Dobbins, but it's a great matchup against Cleveland. He's only 5,200. We do have some negative leverage on him. 16% projected ownership, 14.5% chance of being optimal. But man, 30th in rush DVOA for the Browns defense. It's one of the better spots you can find as a running back. The Ravens only have an 18 implied team total, so that kind of scares me away a little bit. But yeah, I think J.K. Dobbins is somebody that I would probably want to be pretty close to the field. I'm not taking a huge stand one way or another, but I can see, wouldn't be that surprising to see J.K. Dobbins score a couple touchdowns here against this defense, just because the matchup is so good and they don't have Lamar Jackson. So, playing with a backup quarterback, they might be more likely to run it a little bit more. Of course, Huntley is also a great rushing quarterback. So who knows if they're going to hand it off or just let the quarterback run it. But yeah, I have some interest in J.K. Dobbins. He is one of those guys that I would throw in the mix of running backs that I have interest in. But looks like the field has it about right.
Yeah, I'm a lot higher on Raheem Mostert on both DraftKings and FanDuel at a similar price point. Mostert is a little bit more popular, but just on the projection gap between the two of them, I really do think the better play to get here too is Mostert. And especially because of the situation right now with Jeff Wilson being a little bit banged up, and he officially is listed as questionable to play right now. But then also just when you look at the Baltimore Ravens backfield, I know that J.K. Dobbins led the team in touches a week ago, but there's plenty of times we've seen him lead the team in touches, and then it just doesn't end up being the case going forward. I know it's only a 1-day difference, but I do get a little bit concerned considering all his knee issues, and then the fact that this is a slightly shorter day, a slightly shorter week for him, where he gets one less day off. There's just other cheap running backs I like to get to. I'm going to be underweight to the field on Dobbins, and then prioritizing getting to Mostert on both DraftKings and FanDuel at a similar price range, at least for me personally. Let's move on and talk about the Minnesota Vikings now. Kirk Cousins, he's going to be my most rostered quarterback today. I like the spot going up against the Colts. We've also got the game being a just generally favorable offensive environment, which is why these players are projecting pretty well on both sides of the game. And then as far as the Colts defense goes this year, very middle of the road, 15th pass defense DVOA. But the key thing here is just the total is higher than other spots. The pricing is pretty modest on Kirk Cousins relative to like Josh Allen as a pay up quarterback. So points per dollar, I think Kirk Cousins is the best QB on the slate. I like the stacking options to get to. He's going to be my most rostered quarterback. How about for yourself, Neil?
Yeah, I mean, I like Kirk Cousins a lot in this spot. Obviously, we're talking about the best offense in the entire NFL for these Vikings. So Kirk Cousins, yeah, going to look great. And obviously, who you want to stack him with. I guess we have 4 or 5 options you can consider here. Obviously, Justin Jefferson looks phenomenal. We actually have positive leverage on Justin Jefferson as well. So love stacking him with Jefferson. But then Thielen, we have positive leverage there. You can play some KJ Osborne in those lineups. And then, of course, you can throw Hawkinson in there as well. He's just been so involved since he joined the Vikings. So love the options that you can stack him with. And then just looking at the top stacks, so we have Kirk Cousins projected for 29% ownership, and there's positive leverage there, 36% chance of the Vikings being the top stack and a 31% chance of being the top value stack, which that's the part that surprises me, given how expensive Justin Jefferson is, that they still have a 31% chance of being the top value stack, some positive leverage there. So yeah, hard not to love Cousins and doing some Viking stacks here.
Yeah, and I see your super chat. I'm going to answer that in between games. So we'll finish talking about the Vikings here, and then I'll hit on your super chat. As far as Dalvin Cook goes at the running back spot, I slightly do prefer Jonathan Taylor. If I'm paying up for running back, I'm getting to more exposure to Taylor right now on both DraftKings and FanDuel. Doesn't mean that Cook is a bad option though, because he's my second most rostered running back on DK right now. Taylor being 1, Cook being 2. So I like Cook in large field tournaments, but if you could only pay up for one running back, I would prefer Jonathan Taylor on the other side. But Neil, what are you going to be doing with Dalvin Cook today?
Yeah, I think I'm on the same page as you. I would prefer Taylor if I'm paying up for one, just because of the matchup with the Vikings defense. Cook, he's fine. We have negative leverage, actually pretty massive negative leverage on Cook. Excuse me, on DraftKings, projected for 53% ownership with a 38% chance of being optimal. Again, he's actually similar to Taylor to me, that are just going so much ownership going to those two high-end running backs. And I think that there are so many viable, cheaper running backs that I have a little bit, I'm likely to be under the field on both. I mean, if Cook is going to be at 53% ownership, I don't know. I think I'd rather run some lineups out there where I'm just saving some salary, running some of these cheaper guys. So yeah, he's Dalvin Cook. He's obviously very involved in the offense for the Vikings, both in terms of running routes and carries. The most recent game, 15 carries. He ran 32 routes, which is 71% of the time he ran routes. The game before that, 20 carries, ran 70% of routes. He's just very involved both in terms of the passing game and the running game. So, in terms of volume, great spot. But He's also, as you said, a middling spot in terms of matchup with the Colts. They are 15th in the league in terms of rush DVOA. So I think, it's fine. It's just, if he's going to get that much steam, I kind of thought that Dalvin Cook would be a little bit contrarian coming in just because, he's not having the best season that he could have had. But if he's going to be over 50% owned, I'm going to be under the field on Cook.
Yeah, and I think there's definitely a reasonable case to be made to go under the field on him. One thing that's funny, though, is on a 3-game slate, like if you have, 45% of Dalvin Cook, which is what I have right now in my DraftKings build, he ends up being my second most rostered running back, and I still do end up being a little bit underweight to the field on him. But all that aside, he still ends up being a priority on the slate just because of the limited running back options, and he's fairly easy to get to. But once again, I have him in 45% of my lineups right now, which technically does make me a little bit underweight to the field on him, but a strong option nonetheless. The pass catchers here, Neil, I love Adam Thielen. I love Justin Jefferson. Here are my most rostered wide receivers right now: Michael Pittman, Adam Thielen, Justin Jefferson, and then I've got some of the Bills guys mixed in, Diggs and McKenzie, and then it's Paris Campbell and Alec Pierce. So overall, of my 7 most rostered wide receivers, 5 of them are coming from this game. How do you like Adam Thielen and Justin Jefferson?
Yeah, I mean, I love Justin Jefferson here. As I said, he's spot. We saw those massive negative leverage on the running backs who were high on. Well, Jefferson's coming in at 44% ownership with a 46% chance of being optimal. We get positive leverage there. Justin Jefferson and I was just accused of trolling because I said the Vikings are the best offense in the league. I was trolling a little bit there, but Justin Jefferson, I think you can make a legitimate case, might be the best wide receiver in the league, certainly up there. And he gets the volume to account for that. So yeah, at 9,100, obviously the price tag is high, but I like Justin Jefferson quite a bit. The volume's there. He should be able to. I'm not afraid of this Colts defense for a player like Jefferson. So yeah, I love Justin Jefferson here. Adam Thielen, yeah, also another player that, not having quite the fantasy season that maybe you had hoped for if you drafted him in season long, but he looks good here. He's just 5,200, 31% projected ownership, 36% chance of being optimal. Certainly is going to be a part of my Viking stacks. And then KJ Osborne, the other receiver that you can consider playing here. We've got some positive leverage there as well. He's just 3,700 projected for 15% ownership, 18% chance of being optimal. I like KJ Osborne just fine. Obviously, Jay Jets being the number one priority there, and then Thielen and followed by Osborne.
Yeah, and then when we talk about the tight ends, I like TJ Hawkinson a ton too. There's only 2 tight ends that I'm really getting a lot of exposure to on this slate. It's TJ Hawkinson and David Njoku, who we're going to talk about in the next game. But it's really hard to find tight ends that we could feel great about. I know that Mark Andrews, obviously overall for the year, has been the best fantasy tight end of all these guys. But it's hard to feel great about him considering how low the total is in that game, how few points the Ravens are expected to score with Tyler Huntley being at quarterback. So with all that said, the tight end that I'm getting to predominantly, TJ Hawkinson 1, David Njoku, if I'm spending down, how high of a priority is Hawkinson going to be for you?
Yeah, I like Hawkinson quite a bit. I think I'm going against the tools a little bit in that I am going to play a lot of Mark Andrews as well. Even despite we have negative leverage on Mark Andrews, he hasn't really done anything since like week 6. He's just been dead in the water. But man, if he's only going to be 23% owned, it's hard for me not to think he's got at least the upside to absolutely break a slate. He's done it with Tyler Huntley in the past, so I know that's in his range of outcomes. So that is going to dampen my Hawkinson a little bit, just because, if I can get Mark Andrews at 23% owned on a 3-game slate when it's 5,700, I'm gonna click that button. I think more often than the tools would suggest. Probably you should be listening to the tools because they factor in all of the things you need to be factored in. But I like Mark Andrews quite a bit, which is going to dampen my Hawkinson a little bit. But I will say this: Hawkinson is a phenomenal play. As the tools will say, Hawkinson has just been crushing ever since he joined the Vikings. 9 targets, 10 targets, 9 targets, 6, and 8 in the most recent game. He's just been so involved in the offense since he joined the Vikings. And again, it's a middling matchup with the Colts. That's not going to scare me off a player like Hawkinson. So I do like Hawkinson quite a bit. I'm probably going to have less than 50%, which is what we're projecting the field at. And that's just because I am just going to click that Mark Andrews button despite the negative leverage in the tools.
Yeah, a little bit of a price saving on TJ Hawkinson compared to Mark Andrews. He is $700 cheaper over on DraftKings, FanDuel, a little bit closer in price, $6,500 for Mark Andrews, $6,300 for TJ Hawkinson. Is there anything else you want to talk about this Vikings Colts game, Neil?
I think we've covered it pretty well. I mean, yeah, we don't really talk about defenses much on this show. I don't really think that we need to. I think, you play who you want to at defense. There's no real standout among these two. Yeah, I think that we've covered everybody that I have interest in playing. I don't think I'm playing like in Alexander Madison or at least not much of Alexander, maybe in a 150 set in a milli, but I don't think you really need to click that button even on a 3-game slate. Yeah, I think we've covered it fairly well.
All right. So the super chat here we got from H, and Mike, could you pull up the lineup generator, because H has a question about the lineup generator. So we'll talk about that right here. But H is saying, Grand Rising, fellas, top of the morning to you. Can you explain the different stack options in the lineup generator and the pros and cons? He mostly plays NBA, is still learning the NFL, and thanks. Yes. So lineup generator is the newest tool that we have over at Stokastic. And I do think if you are new to playing NFL DFS, this is probably your best way to just make plus EV lineups, is by using our lineup generator, because it's based on the different tools that we have on the site and the simulations that we run. And these are lineups that we are projecting to finish in caching lineups and GPPs over the long course of time. So here's some of what the different options mean. So if you're not familiar with stacks, it's basically going to be quarterbacks within one of his skill position players. Runbacks is going to be a stack. So meaning like the 2-man stack and a run back, you would be getting a couple of skill position players, and you'd be getting a player on the opposite end of the game. So let's talk about the Vikings and Colts game, for instance. A 2-man stack with a run back, you'd be looking at, say, Kirk Cousins with Adam Thielen and Justin Jefferson. And then a run back could potentially be Jonathan Taylor. It could be Alec Pierce, any of the skill position players from the Colts. So that's what the different options are. Now, the pros and cons of each, I would say that the less you stack, the probably the higher your floor is, but the lower your ceiling is. The more you stack, the more potential ceiling you increase. But at the same time, too, you're taking on a little bit of extra risk, because there is a chance that, like, hey, if this team sucks today, doesn't score points, well, all of the players from that side of the game are all going to shit the bed as well. But if you get into a shootout kind of situation, let's say the Colts and the Vikings game, the Vikings end up winning, 35-31 or something like that. There's going to be a lot of points scored on both sides of the game. And think of it this way: the more points are scored, the more possessions get added to the game, the more pace there is to it. So it's just something where a lot of the players correlate together. And then something like Kirk Cousins, every time that he throws a touchdown pass, it's going to be going to one of his wide receivers. So every time that Justin Jefferson has a big play, Kirk Cousins is benefiting as well. So that's where you're going to find the benefit of these different stack rules. And then after you're running through the lineups, as you can see that Mike has pulled up on the screen here, after you run through lineups, you could build up to 20 of them using the lineup generator. It'll show your different exposures at the end of this. You could also save individual lineups, discard individual lineups. One of the new tools that we have at Stokastic. And once again, if you guys want to get access to it for free for 3 days, click on the link below in the description box. That'll get you access for today's slate and for Sunday's slate. Like Joe Lacotte said, shitting the bed, minus EV. Shitting the bed, definitely minus EV. All right.
I missed when we talked about shitting the bed. It might have been me who said it. I don't even know, but I don't even know what he's referencing here.
Oh, because when I was addressing the pros and cons of making stacks, and I said that the con is that if you're making, like a 2-man stack with a run back, is if the game shits the bed, and all of the players there are just going to
I missed that.
Score negatively. Yeah. So that was the reference to shitting the bed. By the way, also, we're sponsored by No House Advantage today. If you guys haven't signed up at No House Advantage, use our link to sign up. You're going to get up to a $50 bonus on your first deposit. And then also there are props you could play against the house there. So if you're in a state that doesn't have legal sports betting, there's a chance you could still play props over at No House Advantage. When you sign up, use our link so you get up to a $50 bonus on your first deposit. All right, let's try to get through this next one a little bit quicker, Neil, and one that I just don't have a ton of interest in overall relative to some of the other spots. But the Ravens and the Browns, as far as I guess let's just group them together for timing purpose. Ravens and the Browns, when we're talking about the quarterbacks in this game, Tyler Huntley, Deshaun Watson, they're two of the quarterbacks I'm getting the least amount of exposure to today. My quarterback exposure is primarily built around Kirk Cousins and Josh Allen. If I had to roster one of these quarterbacks, I do slightly prefer Deshaun Watson, but I don't consider either of these quarterbacks to be a priority relative to other options.
Yeah, so this is another spot where I talked about Mark Andrews as a spot where I'm kind of going against the tools a little bit. I actually like Tyler Huntley. I think I'm going to be doing some skinny stacks, some Tyler Huntley with Mark Andrews. I think is very viable in this game. I get it, like it doesn't look great in the tools, and you're probably wise to just go keep in line with the tools. But I do have some interest in Tyler Huntley here, just because he does have so much rushing. Like if you just look at his game logs when he has started, he has pretty elite rushing upside on a 3-game slate in a matchup with Cleveland, one of the better defenses to face as a quarterback. Cleveland is, let's see, 20th in terms of pass DVOA, 30th in terms of rush DVOA. So just such a great spot for a quarterback that has rushing upside. It's hard for me not to have some interest in Tyler Huntley. So I actually think that I'm kind of going contrarian there. I'm going to be playing a good amount of Tyler Huntley. But with that said, just looking at the tools, we are projecting him for 11% ownership with a 4% chance to be in the top stack. So definitely makes sense to prefer Deshaun Watson there. I think though I'm going to click that button despite the negative leverage and just kind of hope for the ceiling outcome, which I think that he has a pretty high ceiling against this Cleveland defense. So I do think that I have actually more interest in Tyler Huntley, even though there is not like our data does not support it. I think this is one of those rare spots where I'm actually going to pick and choose, and this is a spot where I'm going to choose to go against the tools a little bit. Deshaun Watson, though, yeah, obviously he has rushing upside, not as great of a spot. Baltimore actually a pretty good defense recently. They've been picking it up, so not the best spot in the world for Deshaun Watson, but certainly if you think that he has the possibility of reverting back to the Deshaun Watson of old, which you never know. He's played 2 games so far. At some point he might, and he looked better I think this past week than the week before. But yeah, not as good of a spot against this Ravens defense that's 10th in terms of pass DVOA, 7th in terms of rush DVOA. So my preference is Huntley, but certainly not what the tools say.
And then as far as the pass catchers go, and just going to go in a little bit different order here because we're just talking about the quarterbacks, what are you going to do with the pass catching options? Because I do agree you were a little bit higher on Mark Andrews. And if you're going to like Tyler Huntley, it would just make sense that as the pass catcher that you would go with him with. I'm not really getting to any of these wide receivers, though. I find the wide receivers to kind of be a mess for this team. None of them are good. And then also it's just the usage kind of gets spread out and whatnot. So I do really view Mark Andrews as the only real target that I could have in lineups with Huntley that I would feel any what good about. Is it Mark Andrews for you as well, or are there wide receivers you also like being in that mix?
Yeah, it's definitely Mark Andrews number one. He is the primary. You could consider throwing Demarcus Robinson in there. He's just 4,000. He is he played 61% of snaps in the most recent game, 76% the week before. We've seen him have some fairly big games. So I think that you could consider a Demarcus Robinson. But yeah, certainly Mark Andrews is the one that you feel confident. And then if you want to sprinkle in some Demarcus Robinson, you're welcome to do so. I think that he's fine. What does he actually look like in the 1 second? I know we're trying to get through this one quickly. Yeah, so we have him projected for 10% ownership, 9% chance to be an optimal. It's just 4,000. I think he's in play. We actually have negative leverage on, I think, every single Baltimore running back and wide receiver. Oh, Gus Edwards, we have some positive leverage on. But yeah, all of these receivers, you've got some negative leverage. They're not the best plays in the world. Mark Andrews, clearly the priority, though.
Yeah, and that I do totally agree with. Any lineups that have Tyler Huntley, I think they should have Mark Andrews because I just don't know who else I would feel great about stacking him with. Over the course of 150 lineups, I hardly got to any of Demarcus Robinson, Devin Duvernay, or any of these other guys. I just don't really find them to be appealing fantasy options. As far as the pass catchers go for the Browns, David Njoku is the priority for me. I get a little bit of Amari Cooper, a little bit of Donovan Peoples-Jones. I definitely prefer them to the cheap pass catchers that are on the Baltimore Ravens. But Njoku is the real priority here for me. I do like him as a salary-saving tight end option. What do you like as far as the pass catchers go from the Browns?
Yeah, I mean, Njoku looks great, as you say. 29% chance to be an optimal, 29% ownership. So neutral in terms of leverage score, but he's 4,200. And as we said, 29% chance to be an optimal. He is a very solid play for the Browns. Again, it's not a great matchup against this Ravens defense, but I still think, I mean, Nick Chubb looks pretty good. He's 7,400. We've got him at 23% ownership, 30% chance to be an optimal. So just in terms of our tools, Nick Chubb, another guy that you can consider playing from the high end. Amari Cooper, maybe some interest. So I'm not planning on playing a lot of Deshaun Watson, but I think, Amari Cooper is in play again. Some just like neutral leverage there, 16% ownership, 15% chance of being optimal. Donovan Peoples-Jones, of course, obviously a long ball threat at all times. So he's 5,100, projected for a 15% ownership, 15.3% chance of being optimal. Some interest there in Donovan Peoples-Jones in a milli setting. He's not, a cash game option, not a very small field GPP option, but in, mid-sized to large field GPP. I do have some interest in Donovan Peoples-Jones. Man, Kareem Hunt let me down this past weekend. I played actually a good amount of Kareem Hunt. I was like 4,600. The matchup looks good, and he's just not in. For some reason, they're just not using him, and it continues that way. But he's 4,300. We actually have positive leverage on Kareem Hunt here. So 6% ownership, 11% chance to be an optimal. He actually looks great in the tools. Maybe somebody you'll consider there. And then the one other name that I'm going to throw out there, and Alex brought him up on the show yesterday, Demetric Felton. So he's listed as a running back, but he benefited when David Bell went down 2 weeks ago. Demetric Felton came in and played wide receiver. He was originally a wide receiver. David Bell is out for this game. There is a pretty good chance that Demetric Felton actually comes in and plays wide receiver a good amount in this game. And he's only 4,000, and we have him projected for 0.1% ownership with a 1.9% chance of being optimal. I actually think that I'm going to take a fair number of shots on Demetric Felton, which isn't like, 20% of my lineups, but, could be like 7 or 8%. Like I think that he's if you're playing a 150 set, I think it makes sense to mix him in there some, just because he's getting such little ownership and, might have some opportunities.
Yeah, and as far as the other running back players go in this game, I also find it hard to get to them because Nick Chubb, I prefer Jonathan Taylor and Dalvin Cook as spend-up options. And then once again, if I'm going cheap, I prefer Raheem Mostert to J.K. Dobbins. So just in the respective price ranges of these running backs, they're just lower priorities relative to the other guys. We had the super chat about J.K. Dobbins. We talked about him before. He's somebody who we do project to be a little bit overowned today relative to our simulations. And then I just have hardly ever played Nick Chubb this year. There's always, to me, better options to get to. He's a very touchdown dependent running back. He doesn't really catch a lot of passes. The volume is there for him, but at the same time, too, Kareem Hunt also plays some snaps. So I just think that Dalvin Cook and Jonathan Taylor look like better running backs if I'm having to choose somebody to pay up for. But what are you going to be doing with Nick Chubb for today? Because we talked about Dobbins earlier, but didn't discuss Chubb.
Yeah, so I do have some interest in Chubb. I mean, as I talked about, just looking at the boom bust tool, we see some positive leverage for Chubb coming in at 23% ownership, 30% chance to be an optimal. So we get some positive leverage there. He's just 7,400. I am with you. He's not a guy that I typically love playing. He is, we've been using the term decimal back, I guess, where he's just scoring a little bit at a time. But I do think that Nick Chubb is interesting to me at 23% ownership on a 3-game slate. I get why he's why we have positive leverage there. I think I have more interest in him than you do. I think I'll go to a bit of Nick Chubb just because he's been, he is very involved in the running game. He's not very involved in the passing game, but clearly a big part of the offense for Cleveland. I just don't love the matchup. So that's going to stop me from playing a ton of Nick Chubb against this Browns defense. Against this Ravens defense. The Browns have a 20.5 implied team total. Ravens are 7th against the rush in terms of rush DVOA. So just a really tough spot for Nick Chubb, but I mean, he's capable of doing it against anybody. I think that I'm probably going to be close to the field. It's probably where I want to be.
Yeah, he has to score touchdowns, basically. He's touchdown or bust. That's the way Nick Chubb always is.
But he's good at scoring touchdowns.
Yeah, well, kind of. He's not quite Jamal Williams or anything, but he's the guy that they use down when they're in the red zone to get close to the goal line. It's going to be Nick Chubb. But I mean, I just hate the idea where it's like, all right, he has to score 2 touchdowns or else he busts. And the team
let me fight you on that just a little bit, because Nick Chubb obviously also has major like rushing yards upside. He has games this year, so many games where he's got over 100 yards, got that 100-yard bonus. So I don't know that he's entirely dependent on the touchdown, particularly on a 3-game slate where you don't need him to score 30 fantasy points necessarily to be optimal. I don't know that he's really entirely touchdown dependent. Just looking through his game logs, like 141 yards in the very first game of the year. He's got another with 134, and then several that are above 100 yards. So I don't know that he's as touchdown dependent as you're suggesting.
The 141-yard game, though, he scored 18 fantasy points.
Which, but again, on a 3-game slate, like that would be kind of fine. I think.
Potentially. I mean, also it would be hard to expect him for 141. And in general, I do think of him as being a touchdown dependent back. So I prefer Taylor and Cook. When I built out my lineups, I got to a lot more of those guys. It's not to say that I got 0% of Nick Chubb, just he was much lower priority than those other guys. But one game left to talk about. It's the snow game. We've got the Dolphins. We've got the Bills. As far as the quarterbacks go in the game, Tua has really struggled over the last couple of weeks, but to me, the bigger concern is just the pricing. Tua is really expensive. His pass catchers, Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle, are really expensive. Tua has a big game. The passes almost only go to Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle. From just a pricing standpoint, I found the Dolphins really difficult to get to when I was building out lineups. And if I'm going to be paying up, I would just rather play Josh Allen, who individually I do like with having more upside than Tua because of his rushing potential. What are you going to be doing with Tua today, though? Because there are definitely some price restrictions.
Yeah, I mean, just looking at the top stacks tool, Tua actually looks pretty great in the top stacks tool, 6.5% projected ownership. So, I mean, that's the reason to have interest in Tua. Like, I'm with you. It's a terrible matchup. Now we're expecting bad weather in this terrible matchup. All signs point to Tua not having a ceiling game, but the ownership reflects that 6.5% projected ownership. We've got him with a 12% chance of being the top stack. Obviously, you know who you want to pair him with. It's going to be Hill and Waddle. I will say Waddle has been a little bit limited recently. He's been dealing with an injury. I can't even remember what the injury was, but I know that he's been not running as many routes recently. The past couple games, the last game, 60% route participation. I don't even know what I'm trying to say here. He ran 60% of the routes, and the game before that, 54%. He's just had not been running routes to the same extent in that he had been in like the 80%, 85% kind of range in terms of route participation. The last two games, just 54% and 60%. So Waddle has been a little bit less involved recently than he had been earlier in the year. Tyreek Hill, obviously, as involved as ever, but still, I think those are the two primary places you want to go in your Tua stacks. We actually have a little bit of looks very, very neutral for Tyreek Hill at 9,000, 23% projected ownership, 22% chance of being optimal. That is a result of the weather dampening that a little bit. And then Waddle, actually, we've got, again, fairly neutral, 13.4% projected ownership, 13.8% chance of being optimal. Those are the primary places you're going. There are a lot of, guys you can throw in the mix if you really want to, but I do like doing some skinny Tua to Hill stacks.
Yeah, I think individually, you could always make a case for Tyreek Hill to Tua. For me, though, when I was building a lineups, I just got to the higher priced running backs more than more than Tyreek Hill as an expensive wide receiver. That and Justin Jefferson also ended up being somebody that I got to a lot more than Tyreek Hill. So in terms of popular players, the one I'm most underweight to right now is Tyreek Hill. In the lineups I ran before we started, Tyreek Hill being 23% owned, I got to an 8% of lineups. That was over on DraftKings. And then for FanDuel, where Tyreek Hill's projected for 25% ownership, I got to him 10% there over on FanDuel. So I think one of the opportunity costs of me trying to pay up for running backs is going to come at the expense of Tyreek Hill. And also, me wanting to pay more Justin Jefferson is going to come at the expense of Tyreek Hill. He obviously has upside, but for me, I guess just a little bit too much ownership relative to how my lineups ended up coming out. And we have a super chat here from Jorge Giacomi. He wants to know, given the slate size, would it be better to be on some players above 50% on lineups? I think it's unavoidable. Like there's no way to not have some players that end up in more than 50% of lineups with only 3 games. Also, an honor having, as soon as I reopen my Twitter, having Neil follow me, an honor and a privilege. Well, Jorge, I don't know what your Twitter handle is, but so I don't know if I follow you or not. But Neil, he's very happy that you follow him. But are you going to have more than 50% exposure to any players today?
First of all, Greg, as you were saying that, I thought you were talking about yourself, and I was like freaking out. Like, is fake Neil back again? And that really scared me for a second. But yeah, I'm definitely going to have over 50% of some players in my lineups. As you said, it is kind of inevitable. I mean, it's not entirely inevitable. We've got enough players that you could split it, but I'm not forcing myself to be. I'm not like setting a cap on my player exposure. There are going to be players that are going to be probably in over 50% of my lineups. I'm with you.
I'm curious where people are looking that we keep saying people say that there's no snow in the forecast for Buffalo. We don't have to rehash it again, but we pulled up the weather forecast before. Now, obviously, it's not 100% chance of snow. It's like 75 or 80% chance we're looking, but I've seen a handful of people post in chat. They're seeing no weather in the forecast. As for the other pass catchers in this game, I'm also going to be underweight to Jalen Waddle, similarly to I'm underweight to the field when it comes to Tyreek Hill. I prefer the Bills pass catchers, but once again, I'm underweight to all of the pass catching options in this game. Are there any that relative to ownership you do think warrant being overweight to the field on in this one, Neil?
Yeah, I mean, Stephon Diggs, we've got he looks very neutral in the tools, but obviously you know what the case is for Stephon Diggs. You could make, I mean, as I said, you can make some lineups where you just don't factor in the weather. As people are saying in chat, some people think that the forecast isn't calling for snow. Regardless of what the forecast is calling for, this game isn't until tonight. So like we have some time for things to go differently than expected. And this game could end up being a game that the weather isn't a big factor, in which case, yeah, these guys are going to look great. I mean, Stephon Diggs against this Miami defense in a game where there isn't weather is going to look incredible. So I do like Stephon Diggs quite a bit at that $8,100 price tag. Looks neutral in the tools, 30% ownership, 30% chance of being optimal. But yeah, hard not to have some interest in Stephon Diggs because at 8,100, in neutral settings with Stephon Diggs at 8,100 against that Miami defense versus Justin Jefferson at 9,100 against the Colts, I would prefer Diggs. So it's, the weather, if you want to make some lineups where you're not factoring in weather, certainly Diggs is going to look great. And even in a weather game, they can get the ball to Diggs short. There are ways for it to work out. So I do like Diggs quite a bit. I actually have a lot of interest in Gabe Davis again, just because he's a burner. He's 5,000 against this Miami defense. Hard not to love. I know he's been kind of terrible most of the year. He hasn't done nearly as much as we were expecting after a big game early on, but 20% projected ownership, 23% chance of being optimal. It's a 3-game slate. I think that I'm certainly going to include Gabe Davis in a good number of my lineups. He's actually probably going to be one of the bigger stands I take. I think it will be well over the field, that 20% ownership. And then Isaiah McKenzie, certainly playable. We just saw him have a big game. I think it was on Thanksgiving. We saw him have a pretty huge game. He's just 4,100, 18% projected ownership, 18% chance of being optimal. He looks pretty great. So those are the three, in terms of receivers that I'm going to go to. And then, Dawson Knox looks okay. 14% projected ownership, 13% chance of being optimal. Slight negative leverage, not going to scare me off of Dawson Knox. Certainly a guy who's capable of putting up a big game. I'll have some interest there as well.
And then talking about the running backs in this game, one of the more tricky injury situations we have on the slate is that Jeff Wilson is questionable to play. And I don't think we're going to get an official update on him until the first 2 games have locked. But just the fact that he might not play, I think really makes Raheem Mostert look strong on both FanDuel and DraftKings, because as is, Mostert projects fairly well. If you take Jeff Wilson out of the picture, then you're going to get a scenario where Raheem Mostert is going to be carrying, really, really the bulk of the work there as one of the few cheap running backs we could feel decent about on the slate. So what are you going to do when you approach Raheem Mostert, Jeff Wilson, and just the overall injury situation there?
So I'll say this. I like Devin Singletary in a vacuum. I think that it's a spot where like you can factor in the weather. Devin Singletary is 5,500, right? And we project him for 8.6% ownership, 13.2% chance of being optimal. So just in a vacuum, I think Devin Singletary against this Miami defense is interesting. Well, then if you're thinking that Jeff Wilson might be out, it's easy to pivot from Devin Singletary to Raheem Mostert. So you could build lineups with Devin Singletary in the lineup, maybe in extra few shares of Devin Singletary in your lineups. And then if we get the news that Jeff Wilson is not playing, you could then think about, do I want to pivot some of these off to Raheem Mostert? So I think that's probably the best way to handle it, is just build your lineups with Devin Singletary. Once we get, if we get the news that Jeff Wilson is out, maybe, you can pivot some. And even if we don't get that news, I think that it's a reasonable pivot to Raheem Mostert as well. So I think that's probably the best way to approach it, is make some lineups with Devin Singletary and then think about whether you want to pivot. But I mean, I think that I actually think I prefer Devin Singletary. If Jeff Wilson is in, I think I'm going to prefer Devin Singletary just because the matchup is so much better. But these guys, I mean, because of the weather, I think that if the weather does turn out to be high snow, I think that they're going to be running more than usual. So I'm going to have some interest in the running backs in this game. I prefer the Buffalo side as of right now, just because it's a much better matchup against the Miami defense. So I have some interest actually in both Singletary and James Cook. Actually looks great in our tools. 16% projected ownership, 23% chance of being optimal. I like both those Buffalo guys, but I think, as I said, the easy pivot is put Singletary in there. You can pivot to Raheem Mostert if you want to.
All right, so we are about to turn this over to the live before lock guys, but before you guys leave, number one, you should stick around. You should like the video and subscribe to the YouTube channel. But also, if you're looking to get involved in sports betting, we've got our deal right now with BetMGM, where if you sign up for the first time, you're going to get 2 free months of Stokastic plus Platinum, but in addition, a risk-free bet of up to $1,000. So if you're one of these people in chat that is convinced there's no chance of snow in the Miami-Buffalo game, good news. The total has come down by about 10 points. You get a risk-free bet of up to $1,000. You put it on the over in that game, even if it loses and you end up being wrong about the snow, guess what? You're going to get refunded risk-free bets of up to $1,000 in addition to those 2 free months of Stokastic plus Platinum. That is going to do it for us today, guys. Hope you enjoy all the games today. Good luck, but stick around. We got Matt Savoca and Eric Lindquist coming up next.
What's up, it's Andy. Today I'm going to make 5 selections as I take on the house on No House Advantage. Yesterday we submitted our picks for the Pick'em contest, and today I'm taking on the house, which means I just got to pick 5 player props, and if I get those right, I'm going to net up to 20 times my money. That's what you get on No House Advantage. You get 2 types of contests. You get the Pick'em contest, which we submitted picks for yesterday, where you pick player props, and the more that you get right, the higher you ascend in the standings, you get closer to the top prize. But today, we're taking on the house. No House Advantage is a great place where they combine fantasy and player props and make it very simple to make these selections and net money. So go over there, check it out. Use the link in the description of this video. They're going to match your first deposit up to $50. You put in 50, you get 50, and you make some selections, which we're going to start doing right now. Some of these selections, there's carryover from yesterday's. I'm going to start with Matt Ryan, actually. I have notoriously, for years, I've been saying, I believe this Indianapolis-Minnesota game is actually not going to shoot out. I'm going to go under in this game, which means I think there's going to be more Taylor and Cook than there is going to be Jefferson, Pittman. And man, Jefferson is the kind of guy where he always gets his, but I'm going to take the under on Matt Ryan's passing total. We've seen Jonathan Taylor look like his original self more so these last couple of weeks than he did early in the year. Matt Ryan, I like to call him the mummy. He's just statuesque in that pocket. They want to limit the amount he's going to have to throw if they're going to have a good chance of winning. So I'm going to take the under on Matt Ryan's passing yards. But the receiver on the other side, Justin Jefferson, there's not a game you can truly keep him fully silent. He seems to always break one deep throughout some point of the game. I'm going to take the over on his longest reception, 28.5. I believe that he gets one of those nearly every week. If he doesn't get it, you know they attempt it. But against the Colts secondary, indoors, Vikings, I feel pretty confident that he'll be able to snag one of those long ones today. So give me the over 28.5 longest reception for Justin Jefferson. Then in that Browns game versus the Ravens, that's where I'm going to have some carryover. I told you that I think there are 2 players who are due in this game. I said it for the Pick'em contest. I said it on Odds Shopper for my best bets on the day. But Nick Chubb and Mark Andrews, they're both due for games, and I think they're coming. I'm going with the over on Nick Chubb rushing yards and the over on Mark Andrews receiving yards. We've seen Mark Andrews play well with Tyler Huntley in the past. That shouldn't be an impediment to his production. So I believe he's going to have a good day. Same thing with Nick Chubb. We've seen him clear this number versus the Ravens earlier this year. We know he's capable of it. He was the leading rusher just a few weeks back. I think he's a great bet to hit the over on his today. And then I'm going to take the under on J.K. Dobbins. We saw him gimping around last week. He hasn't been right all year. He was able to break one long run last week, which is what kind of put his total where it was at. But that Ravens backfield is a committee in the first place. So when you couple that with the fact that he still doesn't look right, I think it's only natural to take the under on J.K. Dobbins rushing totals. And those are the 5 picks that I got for you as we take on the house to try to net up to 20 times our money. I'll be back with you later on for the Pick'em contest. I'm going to give you my favorite selections for tomorrow, the Sunday slate. Until then, take it easy, subscribe to the Stokastic Fantasy channel, and I will see you later.
Hot route. Dilly. What does that mean? Stand over there. Of generations of large family breeding. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the NFL Live Before Lock Show presented by No House Advantage. I'm Eric Lindquist. Excited to be talking through a 3-gamer. Feels a little like Thanksgiving. Feels a lot like Christmas, too. Hit that like button, subscribe button, and notification bell as we get going. Goes a long way for us here on this video. Goes a long way for you because, of course, you want to know whenever these shows are going live so you can catch great analysts like, I don't know, my boy Matt Savoca at Draftaholic here. He looks merry. He looks cheerful. Literally all year long, not just because it's going to be Christmas here soon. How you doing, my dude?
Well, I haven't lost any money yet, so it's easy to look cheerful, right?
Yeah.
No,
my Vikings haven't lost yet. Yay!
Hey, at least they're creating a whole lot of fun from a DFS perspective. And speaking of fun, honestly, I think just a 3-game slate in the NFL is such a fun slate size. And especially when you add in this weather factor, will it matter? Will it not matter? Of course, we got injuries to deal with as well, but it's just a lot of fun. Parsing this one out is honestly more interesting to me than a main slate in some ways. So I'm excited to dig in. We got some cool options to talk about at each position. You doing well as well, my friend?
Yeah, doing good. Obviously, the first thing that I want to do, it's kind of weird to start off a show this way, but I think it's important. Obviously, we have our buddy Josh Engelman here on these shows. His mother just passed away. If you guys go to his Twitter, at Josh Engelman, just give him some love. Hit the like button. Love him. Love on him. We're going to miss him here for the next week or two. Hope that he's doing well. Want to just throw out that we're thinking about him, but I know a lot of you guys who watch these shows, over 2,000 people. Some people love to hate on Josh. Some people love to love Josh like us, and just wanted to give him a heartfelt, we're thinking about you, buddy. We want you to know there's no way you're watching this show, but everybody who is watching these shows, head to Twitter at Josh Engelman. Make sure you give him an outpouring of love. Can't imagine what he's going through right now. So wanted to start off with that. Let's dig into this slate. We've got a 3-gamer before us here. And obviously the major topic of conversation has been the weather. I don't really know what to make of it. I think it matters a little bit less on a 3-gamer because obviously I want to get exposure to this game no matter what because of how many limited options there are. There's some amazing skill players, but just from the onset, how are you feeling about this weather situation in Buffalo?
I think if you're playing tournaments and you're thinking about large field and you're thinking about beating a lot of the field and true ceiling performances, players who can actually give us 30, 35 points, it is crazy to rule out Bills and Dolphins players. Yes, the weather could be an inhibitor. And if that happens, we've seen it coming. We've clearly known about this weather. But ultimately, I said on the matchup show with Lofty on Thursday, do the thought experiment. What if this game was in Detroit and these two teams were playing? What would the total be? Would it be 10 points higher than it is right now? So that's the level of offensive competency, the level of talent that is on the field. And yes, snow and wind and bad weather can get in the way of NFL football players doing their jobs. But when you have Tyreek Hill and Stephon Diggs and Josh Allen and even Tua at certain points this season at his most efficient we've seen him, I know it's gone down in the last few weeks, this is still a high ceiling range of outcomes compared to games like Baltimore and Cleveland. I know there's some value love for the first game on the slate, but look, the ceiling is great on this last one.
I also got to think Mike McDaniel at some point, isn't he going to make adjustments for some of the things we've seen in recent weeks that Tua has really struggled with? He hasn't been throwing it outside the numbers very often. It's been hard for him to hit some of those routes that aren't necessarily just down the middle of the field where he's got two of the best wide receivers. Teams have started to play a little bit more press coverage, and it's been very, very difficult for Tua at times to achieve some of that upside. But that's the thing. NFL week to week, teams make adjustments, and I don't want to go completely and overreact to anything that we saw, against the Chargers in prime time, where Tua looked as bad as you could possibly look. I'm notoriously speaking of notorious fantasy. Yeah, I'm a notoriously strong Tua hater when it comes to what he's capable of. But there's no doubt with the skill position players that he has around him, specifically at the wide receiver position and the coach he does, that he has an opportunity to still succeed here. And the ownership is way, way down. So let's go position by position at the quarterback spot. And Tua, he is way down there, sub 10% on Tua. I'm very interested in something like that here on this slate. If the weather isn't that bad, you get Waddle, you get Hill, you get to have a party. So wanted to start off with that one. But at the same time, that first game of the day, Kirk Cousins, you got Matt Ryan on the cheap. Lots of options that we kind of have here at different ranges. Mm-hmm. Who's going to be your highest owned quarterback on today's slate?
Gosh, it's probably going to be Kirk Cousins, but I'll have Josh Allen right up there. Honestly, I think Cousins, from a pure value perspective, looks like the best quarterback on the slate. I think we're going to, if you're going to use our tools, you're probably going to get to a ton of them. When he's quarterback 2 in our projections and quarterback 4 of 6 on this 3-game slate. And in adjusted fantasy points allowed to the position, the Colts are 18th in the NFL. Not particularly good. And then just the general shootout potential of this game, I think Cousins is fine. I hate to say Matt Ryan also looks like a value, but we're talking about a player who is more likely to get us 18 or 20 points than his salary indicates. But really, 30-point upside, I still think against a truly bad Minnesota secondary, I still think that's a low probability outcome, which brings us back to that Buffalo-Miami game. Guys, just remember, Buffalo is not the same elite secondary we've seen, or just gives up fantasy points to the quarterback position more than people realize in 2022. They're 17th in adjusted fantasy points allowed, a little below league average. And Miami, on the other side, is in the bottom 10 in that same statistic. We know what Josh Allen can do. Even if it is snowing, he'll run all over the place. So, look, I'm either going for those value plays in that Indianapolis, Minnesota game, or the ceiling potential of Allen. And yes, Tua.
Yeah, this feels like Thanksgiving in reverse. We had the Buffalo Bills playing the Detroit Lions in the very first game of that one. And Josh Allen, he was north of 50% owned. And I get it. There are better quarterback options that you have throughout this one. You have Kirk Cousins in the dome up against the Colts. I think you can go Matt Ryan on the cheap on the other side of it. Highest total game on the slate. Tyler Huntley can run a football. That's nifty. Deshaun Watson, maybe he can find form here at the end of the season for this beaten, battered Cleveland team that's just not very good at this point in time, especially with their defensive line. But I feel pretty confident in saying that Josh Allen, if that were a nice weather game, that he would be in that same stratosphere that we saw on Thanksgiving. Wouldn't you agree?
Absolutely. I absolutely agree. And look, this is how we parse out small slates, big slates, it doesn't matter. Who has true slate winning upside potential, who has clear value potential, and who's a contrarian play. And let's play devil's advocates as sort of what we're talking about right now. One of the easiest ways to get contrarian on this slate is to build around Baltimore and Cleveland shooting out, because it's the hardest path to a shootout, but it's not 0%. And Deshaun Watson has, in the past, maybe not this year, created shootout potential for both sides. And like you said, Huntley has running potential as well. It's just the hardest to see out of these 3 games in terms of ceiling range of outcomes.
Yep, I'm with you. I think there's some weird ways that you can stack up Deshaun Watson too, just because I think that's probably what it is. You get Nick Chubb out there playing, 60% of the snaps. You have Kareem Hunt playing 40%. People don't want to click on Kareem Hunt and have that be like a featured stack piece. You have Amari Cooper, Donovan Peoples-Jones has really emerged, David Njoku. I think there's a lot of different pieces that you can get to, whereas Cousins, you kind of know you're going to be putting him with Jefferson and maybe another piece, obviously Hawkinson, who's been going berserk and is pretty underrated, I think, for what he's done for my Minnesota Vikings offense for sure. But I think the clear path isn't as clear with that Baltimore-Cleveland game. You have a running quarterback in Huntley and 5 different guys you could put with on the Cleveland side. So it is a mucky game, and it's the lowest total on the board. So I'm totally with you there. I think in terms of the cheapies, though, if you're going to play somebody that isn't Kirk Cousins, that you get sub 6K, you really only get the Tyler Huntley and Matt Ryan options. They're about similar ownerships. Do you have a preference between those two to round out quarterback?
I guess in our tools, Matt Ryan looks a little bit better. I don't know, though. I think maybe you just take the rushing upside, of which Matt Ryan has absolutely none. They're so similar in price. I think you just take Ryan if you have one lineup because of the game environment. But if you ended up with Huntley, because if it's a tournament lineup or the way you're specifically maneuvering your specific lineup, I wouldn't blame you.
Wouldn't blame you either. Anything else you want to talk about at quarterback here? It feels pretty clear cut before we really get to the positions that are going to be difficult.
Yeah, I think we covered it. Deshaun Watson, we're waiting and seeing at this point. Can he figure it out and be that top end QB1 we used to know?
Well, he's a bad person, so I'm okay with not having to worry about it either way. But guys, we have tons of tools and content here available for you. And the easiest way to get all of that right now is through this BetMGM referral that we have going, and 2 free months of Stokastic Platinum. We have lots of offers going on at the site, but 2 free months of Platinum going just for checking out BetMGM with this risk-free wager. You simply deposit $10 or more at the link below at BetMGM. If you were in a legal betting state, you get to take advantage of this, and yay, because you're watching it.
Oh,
dude, stop it. I'm aware. It is.
What was the prompt?
I don't know. Chris is like, free candy, yay, some shit like that. I don't know. We were taking pictures in Chicago, and that was before I took the shirt off. It's fine. But guys, letting you know, this is the number one way that you can take advantage of all of the great tools and content we have here. 2 free months. Yeah, 2 free months just for checking it out. Deposit $10 or more, and when the bet settles that you make for that risk-free bet, so up to $1,000, you're going to get yourself 2 free months of Stokastic. So everything, absolutely everything behind the paywall, completely free to you. Take advantage of that right now. You'd be kind of silly not to. I mean, do you guys know how expensive Stokastic Platinum can be from time to time? Yeah, 2 free months. 2 free months. Take advantage of it. All right, y'all. Let's go to the running back position. Again, Greg, he always makes fun of me for going over on shows. I will say, got a little bit of a late start, and it wasn't my fault. How's that feel? Feels pretty good. Feels pretty good. I can
the pacing
smite
feels
me,
good
mighty
here.
smitier. You know what that's from?
Smite me, mighty smitier. That
Almighty smitey. No, Bruce Almighty.
Bruce Almighty, right?
There
Yeah.
it is.
Yeah.
My guy. To the running back position. The most popular guy on the slate, Jonathan Taylor. We've got him now down to 50%. I just hit refresh. That's a lot lower than we were looking at earlier in the day. Maybe people are starting to hit eject on Jonathan Taylor going up against the Minnesota Vikings, and I get it. That's fine. I will not be one of those people. I don't think I can be one of those people. Dalvin Cook getting up to 38%. I like Jonathan Taylor a lot more here of late. I mean, Justin Jefferson going to be a clear priority for everybody. Jonathan Taylor obviously is too at the running back position. Is he somebody that you're willing to be eating the chalk with today at 50%?
Yeah, I think so. Look, the Minnesota Vikings are easier to pass against if you look at the metrics, but we know what Indianapolis wants to do with Jeff Saturday at the helm. Saturday on a Saturday just wants to run it down their throat if they
See
can.
what you did there.
Yeah, I had to. Look, Taylor is number 1 in expected fantasy points. That's the value of his opportunity. And look, no one's surprised by that. And with his ownership kind of falling a little bit, as you mentioned, that's interesting for our highest projected running back, just from a pure median projection standpoint. I do think that this is a situation where I don't really have a strong feeling beyond going with the field unless it really starts to go down at this point. I do think it's pretty easy to say I can have 60% Jonathan Taylor. You know, if I'm playing 5 lineups, 3 of them have Jonathan Taylor. The shootout potential of this game is excellent, and we know that the usage is going to be there for Taylor.
Yeah, it's just a tough one for me to get away from now that the ownership's come down. It was outrageous earlier. I think this is more indicative of what we're looking at.
It was like 70, right?
Yeah, it was like 73, I thought, a little bit earlier. But as that comes down, again, I track everything and put it back and forth between this spreadsheet. And Jonathan Taylor at 70%. not a play I would want all that much of. 50%, I'm happy being over the field on that kind of a number. We're talking about a guy who's got a 55.8% optimal percentage, and it just makes all the sense in all the land to be over on that. I do think that as you go up in stakes, he'll probably be a little bit higher owned, but $300 below him is Dalvin Cook. So there you go. Maybe that's pulling a little bit of that ownership away. How do you feel about Dalvin Cook here in this spot against the Colts? Because again, lots of other skill position players that we might be looking at.
I guess you could say that Cook is in the better matchup, question mark. The Colts are 22nd in adjusted fantasy points allowed to the position. So that means they're just in the bottom 10. It's just that Cook continues to see less quality usage than he has in previous seasons because of the evolution of this Minnesota team. They're clearly run through Justin Jefferson. Justin Jefferson has the highest boom percentage, if you look at our tools, of anyone in the skill positions for Minnesota. That doesn't mean Dalvin Cook can't succeed. It really doesn't. He's still 15 expected fantasy points per game over the last 6 weeks. That's about 2 expected fantasy points per game below Taylor. So that opportunity value is another tier below. But again, ceiling potential and game environment, really big pluses for Dalvin Cook today.
Yeah, I think the way that I want to be utilizing Dalvin Cook in some builds, just getting away from Justin Jefferson and TJ Hawkinson, considering they're the highest owned skill position players at wide receiver and tight end. I'm trying to just get some individual Dalvin Cook. It doesn't feel good getting away from Justin Jefferson or TJ Hawkinson, but you guys know me and Late Swap. If you watch the NBA shows, it is such a big part of my process. I want to gain some information. It's impossible for me when you're making more than like one lineup to not have Justin Jefferson and TJ Hawkinson pop into a lot of things, but I am going to try to get some individual Dalvin Cook where maybe this is the game. We haven't had that pretty much all season long where he's just racking up all of the touchdowns from this team. Chicago, he had 2 rushing touchdowns, I suppose, that week, but hasn't been all that involved in the passing game this season. That's been really, really disappointing. If you were high on him coming into the year, hasn't exceeded 30 yards receiving one time. Kirk Cousins, definitely looking through Justin Jefferson and now TJ Hawkinson in the fray. Been awesome. Dalvin Cook individually going to be something that I'm trying to get to a little bit as well. But I think the rest of the board opens up in terms of ownership. Everybody else, all the other running backs in all the land, under 25%. You have Mostert, you have Chubb, you have Cook, the Bills running back committee. I just can't even.
It's so tough.
Who is your next highest owned running back if you're not going to be clicking on Jonathan Taylor or Dalvin Cook?
It's James Cook, and I don't feel good about it. Well, no, Raheem Mostert, and then James Cook. But I think you can make cases for both players, especially in tournaments. Again, same game environment and the uncertainty around the position. If Jeff Wilson is ruled out, then I think Raheem Mostert is going to be a very popular player, a very popular late swap player. But James Cook, really interesting compared to salary-based expectations when you just look at the median projection. And while Devin Singletary, from an opportunity value standpoint, had his best game of the season against these Bills earlier in the year, I wonder if that's the role that eventually we see for James Cook one of these days. And I'd rather be early than late and catch that first big ceiling performance. Why not on a 3-game slate where I actually kind of have to get less right in order to find my way to the top of the leaderboard? Not saying Singletary is out of my player pool, nor J.K. Dobbins, but they're well below those 2 players from the Buffalo-Miami game.
Yeah. Everybody in chat going nuts for J.K. Dobbins. I get it. He had some runs that looked explosive. You know, the other problem? 43% of the offensive snaps. That's why you're seeing reduced ownership on him, on James Cook. That's why you have such clear-cut paths to guys who have 75, 80% of the running back touches, and like the Jonathan Taylors and the Dalvin Cooks of the world. It's just so much more certainty there at the top. It's not all that cost prohibitive. Nobody's 8K plus that we're trying to get up to there. But there's one guy that I think is going slept on this slate. And I think Kareem Hunt is somebody that is just really under-owned at 10.5%. He's only playing around, 40% of the snaps here. But as Cleveland starts to slow down and wind down throughout this season, because again, do they even have a shot at the playoffs anymore? It is so bleak trying to get in. You could probably make a case for them in the NFC this year, but the AFC, definitely not. he's been playing a lot more than I think people give him credit for. He plays right around 40%, 40% of the snaps here of late. He feels like somebody that people have just kind of forgotten about. And it's such a cheap price tag that it exists now at $4,300. If I'm going to be using up a lot more of my salary and trying to get to all the other skill position players, I'm happy to try to punt with Kareem Hunt. Why not take that shot? How do you feel about Kareem Hunt on today's slate? Because I feel like a psycho.
It's fine. The thing that I'm disappointed about, especially with Watson back in the fold, the target ceiling has not been the same as it was in the past. And sort of like what we were talking about with Dalvin Cook, obviously to a lesser extent, because we just expect less pure volume for a player like Hunt. But he hasn't had more than 4 targets in a single game this season. Now he's run 20, 11, 13, 18 routes recently, but you got to get more looks than that. And maybe the offense has been in bad situations where they can't dump it down. They're using tight ends a lot, but honestly, we've seen that from Deshaun Watson in the past, and it looks like it's a trend continuing. Just want to advocate for Dobbins a little bit. I'm hoping that I'm kind of wrong about this player, because in 2020, last time we saw him on the field healthy, number 1 in player profilers true yards per carry, number 3 in yards per touch. And then he comes back from IR and goes absolutely berserk last week, 120 total yards. I'd love to be wrong about this player against a bad Browns defense. And if you want to take a chance today, totally fine with that. It's just hard to bet on it when you see much more opportunity and much more ceiling potential in the game environment from the other 2 spots.
Yep, I'm 100% on board with you. What is the snap ceiling for him? I can't imagine that coming off of the injuries. I mean, he had an ACL and then he was
50.
out for 10 weeks here. I mean, it's just been wild, his injury history. Is there any possibility he plays over 50% of snaps here? Because I still think, I can't imagine they want to do that to the guy.
I think 50 is your cap. He's played 51.6% of the snaps, and that is his only time over 45% all year.
Yep. And then gets dinged up immediately. 2 weeks later against the Giants. So yeah, it's going to be an uncomfortable one. We have a super chat, of course. Thomas Rensberger, $1.99. Dobbins, it's his birthday. Good for him. Does that mean he gets 100% of the snaps? I'm guessing no.
Yeah, no. This is very basic science. Change everything.
Yep.
Honestly,
I
he's
like
not a
J.K.
bad
Dobbins.
play. Like the narrative is there. The logic is fine. It's just not going to be as good as value running backs in higher total games.
Yeah, it's going to be wild. This is going to be a wild slate. I'm pretty excited to see who's going to fall through the cracks. Maybe Paris Campbell over the wide receiver position. We'll get to in a second, but kind of rounding out running back. Is there any super deep flyer you might be willing to take a look at? I mean, I feel like Kareem Hunt there, he's still got 10% ownership, but Jeff Wilson, if he ends up playing, is somebody I've got my eye on. I'll probably late swap to some there. Nyheim Hines has now had an actual existence on this Buffalo Bills team rather than just punt returning. I will say maybe a little Nyheim Hines and Buffalo Bills stack, the defense stack, something that, might work out better than most. Somebody slides in the snow, goes and makes snow angels in the corner and he runs one to the house. That'd be fun. But how are you feeling about these guys pulling zero ownership? Anybody who's falling through the cracks in your player pool?
Hines and the Buffalo defense is a combo that kind of intrigues me on a 3-game slate, because if it hits, it's going to the moon. Mm-hmm. In a vacuum, I like Isaiah McKenzie as the gadget player to pick in this Buffalo offense instead of Nyheim Hines. But you're right, he's getting more usage and his ownership is non-existent, which is very hard to find on a slate like this. Demetric Felton's getting some love around the Stokastic crew this week. He's still outside the top dozen running backs in terms of projection this week, but we've seen some efficiency on a per touch basis from him. Low probability plays, but if you had to pick 2, those would be it.
Yeah. I've got one more that I'm going to just throw out there because it's fun. You're going to have to pay attention to inactives because, again, it's very possible that Myles Gaskin ends up getting the okay instead of him. But Salvin Ahmed could be playing backup if you have Jeff Wilson out. This is a scenario that we've seen a couple of times. Obviously, Raheem Mostert had all of the backfield the week before Jeff Wilson got traded. Jeff Wilson then gets traded to Miami, immediately played like half the snaps in that game. That was such a wild scenario. But I don't think Raheem Mostert, another guy with a crazy long injury history, that I think you got to look at some other cheapie from the Miami side that might have a chance to at least be on the field. And both of these guys have shown some kind of a pass game acumen at times, less Salvin Ahmed than you have from Myles Gaskin. So I will say that we'll be paying attention to the inactives closely, but I want to at least advocate for two guys who are a flat 4K. Well, one that's a flat 4K in Ahmed and Myles Gaskin 4,200. That could be very, very interesting if it gives you an opportunity to get to Jefferson, to Hill, and to Diggs, like in some capacity. That is an outrageous trio of wide receivers you could get to and just completely punt. Hope JT and Dalvin Cook don't completely burn you and print money. How does that sound?
It's a low probability outcome, but
sure is.
In a 3-game slate, that is definitely a narrative I could go with.
All right. People asking me where my arch nemesis is. Makacheski. He's in the lab. He's out there working out.
He's boxing right now, getting ready.
He's got to get ready. I would get ready. I'm a beast. Here we go. Vinny C, $5. Also, shout out Mike Lawrence. I didn't shout out our producer before this show. That seems very disingenuous of me. That's not my norm. I'm a good, happy person who gives you love. So there you are. Vinny C, $5. J.K. Dobbins and Gus Edwards stack for a large field GPP or salary savings. I'm not going to call that a stack because once again, I don't think J.K. Dobbins is throwing the ball to Gus Edwards, just throwing it out there, or vice versa. How you feeling about both running backs from the Baltimore side? Definitely feels like a viable way to maybe get the entire backfield, and hey, 3 touchdowns, that can get it done for you.
Look, I'm not going to say it's off the table when there's this few games on the slate. Yeah. But in general, one of them succeeding, it's in the rushing game because they're not using the passing game really at all. And so that means that the total number of plays probably decreases in the game by one of them succeeding. It doesn't mean the ceiling is completely out of the question, but I think I would save that for like a single entry or a 3-entry kind of tournament where it would be okay to get one thing wrong on that lineup and you could still see yourself at the top of the leaderboard. It's really hard to imagine that kind of taking down the millie, but we've seen weirder things, 0.1 percentile outcomes, but again, low probability.
Don't worry, hot mama, things won't get weird. It's good stuff. Anytime you can bring Austin Powers. It got weird, didn't it? Yeah, it got weird.
It got weird.
No House Advantage, guys. That is the sponsor of our lovely
Who throws a
show
shoe,
that we have going.
Honestly,
you fight like, yeah, we can't say that anymore because, again, women can fight just as well as men. There are definitely, there's this chick who does Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, works at the coffee shop down yonder way. Definitely would be protected by her, but she is an absolute beast. I'm going to hire her to help me get ready for my fight with Gajeski. But until then, No House Advantage is where I'm going to make all the money in order to start promoting this fight that we're going to have go down. A lot of people are very confused and don't know what we're talking about. That's fine. But sign on to No House Advantage. Sign up using promo code Stokastic now. And why? Well, you get up to a $50 deposit bonus. And there's this lovely thing called overlay. And it simply happens every single slate over there. NBA has routinely been under 75, 80% filled every single time. NFL, right now, we are 24 minutes from lock. 55% filled in this Saturday triple header. Yeah, you're picking confidence on player props. They have a ton of them available to you. And in the event that you're saying, hey, it's 24 minutes, I don't have the time, Eric, to go in and play a lineup over on No House Advantage. I don't have the time to research and do all the things that I normally do for my DFS exposure. Well, good for you, because we have free projections and free lineups existing over at our site. So you go to the NFL tab, you scroll on down to free NFL DFS. We have the No House Advantage projections and the NHA NFL optimal lineups at your disposal. It takes you 1 minute. Yes, just 1 minute to be able to click on that, find those lineups, and then add your favorite plays all over to No House Advantage into those lineups. Again, $15 to jump into this. If you want to win 5K to first, if you want to win 5K today, your best opportunity is at a site with tons of overlay because they're basically paying you to check out their products. So head to nohouseadvantage.com, download the app at Google Play or at the Apple Store, and check out all of the good stuff going on at No House Advantage, specifically overlay. They are so kind That is fantastic stuff that will help you be profitable long-term. So check it out. Check out all of those free lineups that you can put and copy paste directly into No House Advantage. Good stuff. All right. Thank you so much to them for their sponsorship of this. And I'm just telling you, overlay, that's as good as it gets. Less than 60% filled. It's a joke. 23 minutes to go. Promo code Stokastic. We jump to the wide receiver position. Oh boy. Justin Jefferson, 9,100, going up against this Colts secondary. I am pretty excited about it. It's Justin Jefferson. What are we talking about? Here's a freaking beast. We love this man, don't we?
It's hard to get away. I will give credit to the Colts where that is, oh man. Throwback. I haven't heard that in a minute.
You're welcome.
Ultimately, Justin Jefferson has the ceiling potential, unlike any wide receiver except for Tyreek Hill. Even Stephon Diggs, I still think I put in a ceiling tier below, and that's sort of what our boom bust tool is showing as well today. The Colts are second in adjusted fantasy points allowed to the wide receiver position. They are quite good to that position, but so is Jefferson. It's hard to stay away from him. In fact, I still, just from a gut feeling perspective, think that he has the highest ceiling, true ceiling on the slate of any skill player. But if you wanted to move away from him, we have other options like Hill and Diggs. After that, though, it is a different tier in terms of median and ceiling projection.
Holy shit, we're under 400 likes. That's pathetic. I apologize to everybody involved. My family is ashamed of me.
I'm sorry.
I don't think I can go out in the lobby and look Duke in the eyes anymore. My little puppy, he's going to be looking up at me. Dad, you're a failure. Can we hit that like button? That would be fantastic. I would be very happy about hitting the like button.
I feel like we can do it. I feel like we can get that way higher.
So Justin Jefferson, 46.4% optimal percentage, 46.6% ownership. He's basically like, it just kind of also depends on like what you plan to do, because TJ Hawkinson, Justin Jefferson, and Kirk Cousins, that's by far your most popular double today. Maybe Justin Jefferson just goes completely nuke and you just go Cousins Jefferson. I have that in a number of lineups. I think that that's more than viable. I have some really gross tight ends that I'm trying to take shots on as well. So that'll be fun. We'll get to that next. But Justin Jefferson, whenever he's coming in with no negative leverage, it's very difficult for me not to click on that button. I do like him more than I like clicking on the Jonathan Taylor and Dalvin Cook buttons. That's for sure. Especially if the weather ends up terrible and it's worse than what I expect it to be there in Buffalo. I think that makes a lot of sense. But on this expensive range, Tyreek Hill is $100 less, coming in with less than half of the ownership. I don't know if that's always correct either, but again, that's the difference between playing in a dome and having Kirk Cousins, who's been pretty serviceable, and then going outdoors to Tua, who can't throw it more than 10 yards down the field. Yeah, you heard me. That's what I said. Tyreek Hill, how are we feeling about him as a $100 pivot?
Obviously, the only concern I have is the weather, because Tyreek Hill is just absolutely on another level right now. Even as good as Jalen Waddle is, this whole offense is unlocked because of the play of Tyreek Hill. I even underestimated the level of talent. It was hard to sort of untangle Hill's talent from Mahomes, because I still think Mahomes is the best quarterback on earth. But it's clear that not only does Hill raise the ceiling of his entire team, he's just kind of a one-of-a-kind talent. Did you see that touchdown last week? He kind of tripped that DB while still going full speed. Like, he clearly like made that move.
As long as you aren't talking about the one where, you know, the ball just goes and pops out to the fastest person in the NFL. That pissed me off so much because, you know, Jalen Waddle, where are you, my guy? Where are you? I'm playing Jalen Waddle today.
Yeah, he's still, I wonder if he's still banged up a little bit. But
Tyreek Hill turned his ankle.
Pivot.
So,
yeah,
I mean,
it's true. It's true.
I mean, you never know. I mean, Tyreek Hill wasn't in on the last couple snaps of that game. So just saying, there's possibilities for that too. You have a sprained ankle and now you go out into cold weather with snow. Probably not ideal for a guy who's predicated on cutting and running fast, but just, you know, one man's thoughts. I think the guy that I want to be the most overweight to, though, on this slate amongst the top end of wide receivers has to be Stefon Diggs. I think Josh Allen, Stefon Diggs, we know what that upside can be, what it has been for the last 2 years. And Oh boy, oh boy. If it ends up burning me, it burns me. But I think in large field tournaments, you get 31% Stephon Diggs. I get the Jalen Waddle run back or Raheem Mostert, who's somebody that I have more of in the event that Jeff Wilson ends up inactive. People won't have extra lineup spots to be able to react to some of that. So I'm definitely going to be overweight to Raheem Mostert in the event that he has the large share of the backfield. But how do you feel about Stephon Diggs? Because it's kind of hard to imagine a scenario where if it's actually better than we expect it to be weather-wise, that he wouldn't be a smash for $1,000 less than Jefferson.
Yeah, would be a clear value, a clearly good pivot. And the Dolphins at certain points of the season were flirting with the worst pass defense in the NFL. They're a little bit better now, 22nd in Football Outsiders DVOA, but the Bills still have the third best pass offense in that same statistic. And look, Diggs is clearly the number one option. I really like him. And one of the things we can also say from a game theory standpoint is if we go to Tyreek Hill or Stephon Diggs instead of Justin Jefferson, having that much salary tied to the late game, we have much more information and we can always pivot to a more contrarian play if we're trying to just save our days because our earlier games didn't work out. Whereas if we have Jefferson and he burns us, that's 9.1K down the drain. It's a whole lot of money. 9.1K down the drain for that lineup. It makes it very, very hard to climb out of that hole.
Yeah, so what I'm doing, I think this will help some people. Again, it's live before lock. We play DFS. We play DFS every day. And one of the things I'm always constantly thinking about in NBA is late swap. And then on these three gamers, Thanksgiving and this, I'm thinking about late swap constantly. I'm crunching with only 49,900 as the cap. Like, I don't want to get to any 50K caps because I want that $100 to get to Jeff Wilson in the event that I have dead lineups and he ends up active. I also don't want to have duplication of 50,000 because I guarantee you there'll be a lot of people who have the same lineup more than likely, unless you're getting very contrarian in that regard. And then by being higher on Mostert, somebody that would I want to play him at 25% ownership at the moment against Buffalo's defense? Not really, but it's another position along with Diggs, another position where I can get some swappability to be able to get to Tyreek Hill in the event that I need to make some kind of a swap and things don't go well for me in some of these earlier games. Or, so right now I'm a little bit lower on Dalvin Cook. I'm a little bit lower on TJ Hawkinson. I'm a little bit lower on Kirk Cousins. So, I mean, those are three massive pieces from the Minnesota game that if they don't go as well, I have more swappability, more opportunity to do some things with some lineup spots. So definitely something I wanted to add into the fray there. Anything to add to that?
One way I would help myself gaining access to swappability in the late games, if I'm playing a player like Jefferson, who right now in my single entry lineup, that's Jefferson in there because I just think the ceiling potential is so fantastic.
I'm with
get to a player like Josh Allen, because then I can move down to Tua or something like that. And then I'll have more flexibility in that same lineup. I have other late swap options from these later games in that same lineup. So just give yourself salary outs so you can have more flexibility when you consider late swaps.
Yeah, and I'm sure the guys on the previous show, I was in and out a little bit there because took my dog out and did all the morning things here in old LA. But you got to also make sure that when you're in cruncher that you do not crunch with anything less. Like, you want to have players against your defense on a 3-gamer like today. Like, something random could happen, or defense is like a net zero and nobody goes nuts, and you're probably just want to have the cheapest one. You never really know. But for me, defensively, I want to have 4 or 5 players that have access to going up against my defense. So you have to manually change that in cruncher. Don't forget about that either. Feel like I remind everybody on these kind of short slates that that's an important characteristic of it. Or on Showdown, I think people have gotten more familiar that it's okay to play defenses against it. But we go back to wide receiver. Jalen Waddle has been disappointing beyond disappointing for those who might have him in year-long in best ball. Not, saying that that's me. Amari Cooper, 6,100. Michael Pittman, 5,800. The absolute run back of the universe. Who stands out to you in the 5-6K range?
I think you can say you're attaching yourself to game environments with Michael Pittman and Adam Thielen, right? You can explain the ceiling potential there, but they don't totally jump off the page from a value perspective. They're all right. I'm going to players with more ceiling potential, to be honest, when I'm playing tournaments. Gabe Davis, Donovan Peoples-Jones. Yeah, I have a little bit of Amari Cooper. I don't think the ownership is too high there. But one of these low salary players I also want to talk about, if I could go a little bit further down the board, mentioned him already. Now, I do see his ownership moving up a little bit, but Isaiah McKenzie, I still think that there is that rogue 10 target game, even with Cole Beasley possibly playing or something like that. I think that there is ceiling there. And then finally, Alec Pierce, if you want to get a low salary wide receiver option from this Indy Minnesota game as well.
I can't tell you how happy I was that they did not add him to the player pool. It just, one more thing to have to think about with Buffalo that already has a 3-headed running back committee now that has, one very obvious Stephon Diggs, but then has this fool in Gabe Davis who just apparently doesn't want to do things anymore. I just didn't want to have to think about Cole Beasley. So now we don't have to, thank God. Thank you. Shout out to them. I like Jalen Waddle as a super contrarian option. You're getting Jalen Waddle, who's been a short ADOT guy in the past. I got to think that they're going to get him more involved. Their offense has really struggled the last 2 weeks. Part of it has just been them taking away Jalen Waddle. It's very difficult to take away Tyreek Hill because he could just run fast and do things that other football players on earth can't do. I think they're going to find ways to get Jalen Waddle more intertwined in the offense, especially if they're not going to be able to run the football like at all. Which is very, very live if you don't have one of your two featured backs there. So I'm going to get to some 7K Jalen Waddle. I think it's a pretty easy pull the trigger at just 11.7%. But Donovan Peoples-Jones is probably my favorite tournament wide receiver on the entire board. Have people watched him play football? Not to say hashtag watch the tape, but this dude is dynamic. He returns kicks too for Cleveland. So you want to play a defense and get some correlation there. Little bit of a bonus there, but at 5,100, there is absolutely no way on planet Earth that I would not be overweight to Donovan Peoples-Jones, a guy who I routinely have played his fantasy score props at different sites for props. I've constantly had opportunities to be way over the field on him when he was just way too cheap. He's 5,100 here. This is his high point of the season, but I don't care. I want all of it and all the land going up against Baltimore. How do you feel about him?
Played 97% of snaps last week, 96% route participation rate, 12 targets. Is that going to be the norm? Could that opportunity, that level of opportunity shift back to Amari Cooper? Sure, possibly, but we've seen it now. It's no longer, this guy is capped out at 5-6 targets. We had a 9-target game in week 10 from Brissett, and now Watson has thrown him a 12-target game. If you're going to have 8 catches for 114 yards, nearly 20 fantasy points, you're on my radar, period. Even if the Baltimore defense has certainly figured it out in the second half of the season.
It's pretty tough for me not to click on that button today. I'm just saying.
The defense is good he's going against. That's the game environment could be a sludge fest.
All right. Anybody on the cheap end of wide receiver? Because that's my highlight in the 5K range. You talked about Isaiah McKenzie, 4,100. I think Demarcus Robinson, who's been somebody who's gotten more looks in this offense, still 6 targets last week with Tyler Huntley. That's a good thing. Primarily Tyler Huntley the week before, 8 targets. There's 7 catches as well. But anybody sub 4K that you feel like rolling the dice with?
You could do KJ Osborne, especially if you think that Indy, Minnesota is the game you need to build around. Obviously, it's just low salary access to it. Harder to get to Demarcus Robinson or Devin Duvernay, but never say never. Same thing with Trent Sherfield, who's busted out a 70-yard touchdown already this season. And me, don't say it, but also if he has one long catch, consider yourself very lucky. But Deshaun Jackson sitting down there at 3,300, not my favorite, but again, 1% ownership. If you're looking for that kind of play today in a large field tournament, why not punt with him?
You don't say that.
What is that from?
I can't even remember right now. But 3 free days of NFL. Guys, we have 9 minutes left to go. There's tons of Showdown coming up later in the day. I know a lot of you are going to be playing NFL Showdown throughout the entire day. If you guys want to go into Stokastic, I'm going to be hanging out in the premium Discord throughout the day. I'll probably meander my way up to the premium NFL tab too today. Looking forward to watching some football. I'm obviously going to watch my Vikings here in the first game, but tons of Showdown stuff. And then a Sunday main slate, and then a Sunday Showdown slate, and then a Monday Showdown slate. That is a ton of football coming up here in the next 72 hours. And just so happens, this deal is for 3 free days of our NFL DFS tools. 3 free days of the NFL DFS ownership, the DFS projections, the lineup generator, 1v1 tools, top stacks tool. Everything we have for the NFL will be at your disposal for every single slate over the next 72 hours. It's Saturday into Sunday into Monday. This is the best day, period, for you to take advantage of this offer, do it. Sign up in the video description box below. Everything is right there for you, but 3 free days to see what we're offering behind the paywall. You'll want to do that now. So if you're one of the over 2,000 people in chat, first off, hit the like button. But secondly, head to that link below. Check out the tools. They are completely free to you right now. Doesn't get better than that. All righty, let's go to the tight end position. And again, defense, there's 6 of them, and we can talk about our favorites, but it's going to be more of a short-winded thing for me there.
Correlation.
I don't know. Mark Andrews coming in very low owned compared to what I was expecting him to be. David Njoku coming in about where I expected him to be, but TJ Hawkinson, 51.4% for the guy who, by a new acquisition, a guy who got traded in the course of a season, the most tight end targets and receptions for somebody in their first 6 games. I don't know how many games he's played more than that there now. I'm just looking.
I think it's about 6. No, I think that's about right. And honestly, it's been a total change of pace for Hawkinson in a good way. Honestly, I think I trust Hawkinson in terms of opportunity value more right now than Mark Andrews. And I agree with what the guy said on the deeper dive, where if you're going to Tyler Huntley and you're looking to play a contrarian stack, I don't know who else you go to. But look, if you're going to get 4 for 50, like you did 2 weeks ago and 3 weeks ago, or 2 receptions for 17 yards like you got last week, it's not going to work out well when he's the highest salary tight end on the slate. He hasn't had more than 63 yards since week 6. It's Mark Andrews. We know what his ceiling is, and we know Cleveland's defense isn't good, but I think a lot of people have been burned over the last part of the season, and that's why you're seeing the ownership so low.
Yeah, everybody's been hurt. We've all been hurt by the tight end. If you haven't, you have Travis Kelce in year long, or you just ran into Evan Ingram in some stacks last week, which I did. That was very fun. A lot of other mistakes were made on that slate, but we'll talk about that tomorrow. Rest of the board here, I do like the Mark Andrews shot. I like that shout out. I think that 22% for him is very low. Dawson Knox, I'm surprised. You have Josh Allen as a quarterback. Again, I understand the weather, but I like getting to that direction. And then Kylen Granson, he was a pass catcher back in the day. Hasn't really shown up that much for him here in Indianapolis, but they've always had a revolving door of guys you could take shots on. I think he's probably my favorite of the cheapies here. I have some other cheapies I'm taking shots on, like Isaiah Likely. I'm way overweight to it. Sub 5%, Jelani Woods, gross stuff. Who are your favorite punt tight ends to get to today?
Gosh, I'm probably ready to get hurt with Mike Gesicki again. I definitely think that that's a game environment play more than pure projection. Dawson Knox is okay. Isaiah Likely at 2,600, just because he's so, once you hit below 3, they almost hit a certain, it's a different calculus, right? Because all you need is like 7 to 9 points from them, and you feel great about them from a value perspective. So you just have to fall into the end zone. With Gesicki, even at 3,400, he has to do something efficient on that hopeful end zone target. Knox is the one where if I'm willing to get up to 4K, he could actually have a strong performance. We saw that fantastic flipping touchdown. Although the end zone usage has not been as good as it was in 21, playing with Josh Allen really helps. The big 3, of course, Njoku, Andrews, and Hawkinson look much, much better from a projection standpoint.
Also shout out, so no house advantage, tons of overlay. The Millie on DK is definitely going to overlay today. Let's see. Maybe not overlay, but it's definitely not going to fill. We've got 20,000 entries, 23,000 entries away from filling. 18,000. There we go. So that's a lot of entries still remaining in that. You don't get a lot of opportunities. I'm going to put a couple more in there and just see what happens. So wanted to give that a shout out too. Whenever I can find opportunities for you guys to make more money, overlay is generally the best way to do it. No house advantage. And now DraftKings today. That's wild. All right. We jump to defense here, rounding out our show. Hit that like button. You guys are the best for hanging out with us throughout. But my highest owned defense, Miami. I'm just punting with defense right now. 2,300, whatever. If it's bad weather, maybe that shows up for me a little bit. I don't feel great about the Colts Vikings one. That's just another lineup spot I'm not going to give up yet, even though I'm hoping that game doesn't go completely berserk outside of Jefferson. Who's your highest owned defense today, my friend?
Dolphins, again, it's the salary saving, and we can correlate it with a player like Mostert. So I understand why the optimizer is getting there. I honestly think the defense that might be in the best ceiling spot that we're kind of underrating, the Baltimore Ravens.
Ooh.
They're only 3K. You have them as the second highest projected defense. I think they're actually literally tied with the Vikings in our median projection. But again, I think a 10-point score here against a arguably still very rusty Deshaun Watson is reasonable for a Baltimore defense that seems to have really figured things out post-trade deadline. I'm fine with any defense on a slate this small. Truly, like, correlate it with your running back. Just even if you're like playing Josh Allen, play the Bills defense if you want to get contrarian. That's fine. I just don't see a ton of paths that we can easily suss out here as a best option. So use your lineups as a guide.
Use your lineups as a guide.
Use the rest of your lineup as a guide, right? Like use the strategy we always talk about.
I love it. Guys, this is the best. Jorge Yakum, $10. Thank you so much. My guy always coming in. Yakomi coming in strong with the 20 gifted subs. And then a question. Thoughts on going above 50% on Thielen and Pittman? I have zero problem with it. I would expect you're probably very high on that game. If you were to just jam that first game of the night, I have no problem with it. I feel like I'm jamming more the last game of the night and have some very weird Cleveland stacks. But anything that stands out to you in terms of Thielen or Pittman, no problem with them, right?
Oh, absolutely not. It's funny. I have like two sets that keep popping up. It's like Thielen, Pittman, Jefferson, and then one of Campbell or Pierce keep like popping up in these little groups. So no, absolutely not. And I still think Thielen, Hawkinson, if you wanted to just take a ton of opportunity and fade Justin Jefferson kind of cleverly like that, also not out of the question.
All right. Well, we got 40 seconds, all of 40 seconds left. So I'm going to round out the show here. Thank you so much to Mike Lawrence, crushing it there up in Buffalo. Stay safe, my friend, even though they have snow plows. You'll be fine. Just you weren't fine. You had some crazy snow a little bit earlier, right? That was some wild stuff. But take care of yourself. You're still loved. I'm just saying. Protect yourself. My guy, Matt Savoca, any final words for the people regarding late swap, regarding lineups, regarding Christmas, regarding anything that you want to talk about?
Die Hard is a Christmas movie.
Oh,
that's
my God.
hot
You
take
guys
for the day.
We got to get out of here. Love Actually. That's a Christmas movie.
Love you all. Chat was awesome as usual. See you tomorrow.
That was quick. I like that. Skull, baby. I'm about to go watch some football. Let's go, baby. Thank you so much for hanging out with us here on the Live Before Lock show. He's Matt. He's cool. I'm Eric. I'm very, very not.